quadrants are just another way of talking about first, second, and third person pronouns. All natural languages have I. The first person is defined as the person who's speaking. So at this moment, I'm first person, as it should be. Second person is the person being spoken to. So you would be second person at this point. Third person is the person or thing being spoken about. So if I'm talking about that chart, that's a third person in this definition. If I'm talking about Roger, he's third person. I'm talking about him as an it, or he or him. When we talk second person, I to you or I to thou, that's a very intimate connection. That means that two sentient beings are somehow resonating with each other. There is all natural languages have first, second, and third person pronouns because these actually represent perspectives you can take when looking at reality. And there are other ways of saying first, second, and third person. Art, morals, and science are first, second, and third person. Art is first person expression. Morals is you. How do I get along with you? How do we get along? That's the good. And truth, objective truth, is what science looks at. So whenever you hear the good, the true, and the beautiful, or art, morals, and science, or Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, same thing. We find these reappearing everywhere. And we codify them as the four quadrants. We subdivide it into plural to have a kind of symmetry. You can talk about a singular it, which is mostly what atomists do and positivists do. But you can talk about systems of interacting processes, and that's what systems theorists do and sociologists. And so that's the lower right quadrant, which is social systems. The upper right is an individual it. I can look at my own being as a third person it, from a third person perspective. So if I look at Roger as a third person, and then he's going to be about this high, I'm going to cut open his brain, if we can find it. It will have dopamine, serotonin, marijuana, gaping hole here. That's science does that. Science. So in the upper right, we have brain organism. You have a limbic system. You have a reptilian brain stem. You have a liver, etc. Those are fine. Those are all it. That's the science side of the street. If I talk to Roger as a person, go, how you doing? Good. Excellent. So that's an I-you, that's an I-thou. So we're actually exchanging, we're touching. There's a resonance, there's a mutual resonance. So the I-thou relationship is very important. That's why all languages have a second person in it, because it really means it's something that I'm resonating with as a sentient bearer of consciousness. So there's an implied use of second person, which is that second person has a first person. And that, so if Roger talks to me, he's first person and I'm second person. Mm-hmm. If Roger and I reach mutual understanding, we'll both use the pronoun we. And that's a really interesting thing, this we. It just means we understand each other. And if I say, Roger, do we understand each other? He'll say, yes, we understand each other. That we is magic, it's extraordinary. It's probably one of the greatest mysteries of all. And so much so that a lot of great mystics like Martin Buber would say that God is found in the I-thou relationship. Because it's where we touch that spirit can be shared. And ultimately can be shared because it's one spirit. But you notice that when you touch another relative human being, you both resonate and say, I know what you mean. Or I love you, or I feel you, or I'm here with you. That I-thou relationship, in a sense, God is the hyphen, the point of touch. That's one way of looking at it. Of course, spirit is the empty ground in which this is arising. But that one I can understand another I in mutual understanding or resonance as a we is just extraordinary. So we put that in the lower left quadrant, and we technically is first person plural, but when I and thou touch, it forms a we, and we say we understand each other. And so the lower left quadrant is sometimes write it as you/we or thou/we, but it means this whole extraordinary second person relationship with a singular or plural, where science would look at this whole gathering here as an objective system, look at it in terms of facts and just the values. Morals looks at this we. How do we treat each other? What is the good life? What should I do? Not what is, but what should be the case. So that's why we have the good, the true, and the beautiful, or art, morals, and science. These are all variations on first, second, and third person. So first person is also the interior I, and that's in the upper left. And that's where we're talking about consciousness of an individual sentient being. And that is it's also art, because art is self-expression. It's beauty that's in the eye of the beholder. So these quadrants we use these to help orient us and stop us from reductionism. By reductionism, I mean, if you look, for example, in consciousness studies today in the universities, there's a raging argument about which is the correct way to approach consciousness. From a third-person scientific point of view, look at it in the upper right as consciousness, the product of brain chemistry and neurosynapses and serotonin and dopamine. And when you have a certain complexity in organic structure, consciousness emerges from it. It's all it language. It's all described in third-person its and objects. Those are there. We're not denying those are there. We're denying consciousness to be fully explained in those terms. The other side of the argument uses phenomenology, or I consciousness. It says, no, the only thing that's real is my own introspective awareness. That's what's real. Don't tell me the subjective stuff is out there, because that's experienced only in my own consciousness. So phenomenology, which deals with the upper left, is an intense attempt to reduce all we and it to phenomena that arise in my consciousness. We're not saying that that isn't there either. That is also there, and that's important. What we are saying is that the battle between first-person approaches and third-person approaches is a not useful battle anymore. They're both correct. And that's one of the sort of main things that we go on in the integral approach is everybody is right. That everybody has a grain of truth that has to be included. We sort of make fun of it by saying no brain can produce 100% error. Nobody's smart enough to be wrong all the time. Therefore, every single major approach to human knowledge has some degree of truth. The integral approach insists upon honoring those truths. The tricky part then is how they all get together. And that's where the game gets interesting. It's an entirely different kind of game to play. Usually if you go to school of philosophy, or go to school of psychology, or any of the disciplines, if you take up a school of psychotherapy, for example, they'll spend a great deal of time telling you why the other schools are mistaken. And that's sort of what your education is. It's figuring out why so many other people are fucked up. We don't take that approach. For us, every single approach has to have some grain of truth. And so now you're asking a different question, you're playing a different game. And the game here is, how do they all fit together into a larger coherent structure that honors all of these important insights? So the quadrants are a way to just remind us, are we really looking at the interior, at self, at aesthetics, at art? Every occasion, that means every actual event, every moment has at least these four quadrants. In other words, every moment has a perspective of I, we, and it. So every moment has an aesthetic component to it. It has a beauty, it has a form. Every moment has an interactive component. We're actually interacting with people. Every moment can be looked at objectively as well. So we're not saying that these are nice things to have. We're saying they're actually the structure of every moment as it's arising.